Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Cinema Savvy. It is myself, George. Delighted to be joined by Eammon Jacobs for another episode in the Pixar Retrospective. And this week, we are going to be talking about 2004's The Incredibles, directed by Brad Bird. And a film I don't think we've ever spoken about on this channel, which is very weird to say. But before I even try and piece together when that might have ever been spoken about, Eamon, for people at home who don't know, how are you doing today? Because we've had quite a chat already.
I'm good. I'm all right. To start with, apologies for my sort of sparse background. I'm currently in the process of moving house, which is always fun. But I'm good. It's keeping busy. For context, I'm the deputy editor at Dexito, so my day job also keeps me quite busy. So yeah, it's been a fun couple of weeks. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm not moving, but I've been helping a sibling move for a few weeks. So I understand when we were chatting, arranging some WhatsApp, I was like, honestly, I understand. I was like, I know how to work around you, and I know things might go wrong. But I'm delighted to have you on. Second time on the channel, I was able to get you on earlier this year for one of the Andor spoiler discussions. And this video is going up on the 30th of December. We're batch recording these for people curious at home because it's December and we have lives and would like to not basically end up doing videos across Christmas like last year. So I really put my foot down this year. So it's amazing to get you back on. This will be, I think, the second last video of the channel on the year. So I'm safely saying that to say Andor has been my TV show of the year by quite a distance. Although I haven't seen Fallout Season 2 yet. And I know it's now weekly. They're not dropping it all at once. So does that count as 2026? I never really know that little asterisk, do you?
That's a tricky one, yeah, because it does cross over into next year, doesn't it? Technically, it premieres in 2025, so I guess you could. It's one of those technicals. You could argue 25, you could argue 2026. But I have to agree with you on Andor. Absolutely, my show of the year. I have rewatched it, and to say that I'm painfully on brand, I was literally watching season 2 last night again for about the third time. So, yeah, it's a beautiful piece of TV, let alone a beautiful piece of Star Wars. And I just think we've not had something this year that has really gone like pound for pound with that ending specifically. I know you could make an argument for Severance, maybe even Alien Earth, on how you like your xenomorphs. But Andor for me all day, every day of the week.
That's a great chat. I kind of agree. I think because we know what Rogue One is and we don't know what's coming up next for enough. Side tangent. They're like, why aren't they talking about Pixar? They shout. No, that's a really good point because they're probably. I binge Severance like in the space like a week, and it's a bit of a blur at the moment. But yes, Severance is. It's been a very good year for TV. It's been a very good year for film. And we're going to continue doing TV and film next year. And we're going to be talking about Pixar every Tuesday as we continue to do so. And The Incredibles is an interesting one. And where I'm going to kind of put you on the spot with this, ask everyone that's jumped on the series, it's thrown people, actually, if I say this bit behind the scenes. So might have to alternate this in the future. Your earliest Pixar memories?
Oh, it's Toy Story. It's no question. Toy Story, VHS, my grandma's house, sitting under a blanket with the cat and just watching Toy Story on like a Saturday morning. That's kind of, yeah. Then Toy Story 2, obviously, again, fantastic sequel. I also have a vivid memory of going to see Finding Nemo like twice at the cinema. I think by that point I'd become like the designated cinema friend in our friendship group at school. So it was like, oh, he likes films. We'll just take him as well. And then I was 10 when Incredibles came out, and that was like peak getting into superhero movies territory. So this really hit at the right time, especially like post Spidey. It's kind of I kind of associate like Toy Story, Finding Nemo, Incredibles, all in the same kind of era. Obviously, I'm well aware they're not from the same era, quite a distance. But as a kid, it just kind of all feels put together.
I feel like for me, I have this I have like a not like a BC AC thing, but it's like I've got Before the Dark Knight. That's like the childhood. after the Dark Knight, like getting into film. And that's a really weird way. But you know, when there's like that one catalyst one, but I was also 12. So that's the age where it is like I'm a bit more aware. But you are onto something. There are certain films that you group together. And I would group
Mm.
to a Toy Story. Even though I didn't even have this on DVD, but I had Toy Story on VHS, then DVD. But there's something about it coming together, yet it's 9 years apart, which is wild because 9 years after The Incredibles is Monsters Uni 2, and that feels like it could be 20 years apart.
Yeah.
Really interesting, and I'm kind of glad we touched that. We're going to talk about some superhero stuff as well, which is very fun, and it is just us two, so we might be able to get a little bit more in depth than if there was three of us. Not that three people, but we're also on a timer as well that we are both following. So we'll jump in with this. We'll go to the IMDb plot synopsis as always, and this is a lovely simple one. While trying to lead a quiet suburban life, a family of undercover superheroes are forced into action to save the world. And that kind of leads into another thing with The Incredibles. We'll talk about probably Fantastic Four a couple of times today. What is your history with this film in particular? Because when we spoke, you mentioned about jumping on for The Incredibles. I have maybe a saying that you might throw me out of this. I'm not the biggest fan of The Incredibles.
Wow. Okay.
Really interesting, because every time I say that, I don't mean it in an arrogant, proud, oh, look at me, I'm different. Because we all know someone that's like that, right? With an opinion. But as a kid, it never hit me at the same level I think it should have. Yeah, I love Nemo. I love Toy Story, Bugs Life. The Pixar stuff I grew up with. And I have distinct memories watching this at my neighbours on DVD. We didn't go to the cinema. 2004 was Spider-Man 2 for me. That's the big film. Harry Potter, Prison of Azkaban. Ready to Feel Old. The great film Roofman is now a period piece when I was 8 years old. I can't quite wrap my head around that at the moment. I loved watching Roofman, and it really did hit me at a certain moment. You get Simpsons Hit and Run come up as a PS2 game, and I was like, oh no. I was like, I'm feeling nostalgic. I am actually remembering like the time now. But The Incredibles, it never hit me. And I thought as I might get older, as the superhero boom sort of went nuclear, I'd go back to The Incredibles. And I was never as gripped. So I've actually been more excited to see it now in the context of looking at the studio, looking at Pixar's development, which has made it a bit more exciting approaching for this review. But I'm curious at your history with it. Because again, I'm surprised I don't like it, and everyone always seems to be.
Yeah, I mean, again, it just comes down to that sort of. That was really when I got into superheroes, and obviously, as I've kind of alluded to, Spider-Man was a big part of that. And obviously, 2004, Spider-Man 2, phenomenal, one of the best superhero movies ever made. But what's interesting now is that both The Incredibles and Spider-Man 2 sort of deconstruct the idea of a superhero having a real life. Now, as a kid, I was just very much like, oh, it's fine. He's a family man. Like they're all superheroes. It's kind of, it is what it is. Going back to that, it's like, this is so ahead of its time in terms of the genre on the screen. Like, there's kind of no wonder that it kind of got me at the time that it did, because it was showing me just how far you can take this genre in a way that's not just, saving the day and, standing triumphantly on a building in front of an American flag. So yeah, it really does just come down to that, getting me at the right time of being interested in superheroes and seeing that it's not, that it can be a varied genre of with so many different types of characters that isn't just, the Boy Scout or the brooding, depressed guy in a black cape. So yeah, it was just that. It was just variety, really.
I'm with you because this viewing this weekend hit me in that way, even though I would have seen this maybe around the time Incredibles 2 came out, but I didn't watch Incredibles 2 at the cinema, which is ironically, I was thinking this was in the schedule. I actually don't remember anything in the Incredibles 2. It actually feels like a black hole. And I have seen it because I remember watching it on Disney Plus, but I have no recollection of the story. But I was sat there like, wow, like there's a bit of Spider-Man 2 vibes here, like what is life behind the cape? And I was like, hold on, this is 2004. This is the same year.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's incredible to reflect on the superhero genre, 20 plus years later, where the discussions are we tired? is the MCU back? Is the MCU finished? Switch it, retweet it 4 months later. We play the same games. And I'm just sad that no one's really done what this and Spider-Man 2 have done. And that's, I don't mean it in an arrogant way. And I'm sure there would be some films that have deconstructed within that across the 20 years. But the fact it's kind of pre-MCU makes it feel a lot wilder. That there wasn't even that many. Okay, you had a couple of X-Men films. You had Blade, but it's not really family friendly. It's more for adults. Of course, you've got your Superman. I don't think there's the base there would be now to do a film that's like, yeah, no one's ever done this before. And even researching for this, the behind the scenes and how this one made has actually not thrown me, but made me appreciate it a little bit more. And I think I really like Brad Bird as a film director, and I've always said this. Now, I have only seen Tomorrowland once. And I'm still very disappointed, not a Brad Bird, that Disney decided Tomorrowland would be why we ultimately get Jared Leto's Tron Ares and not the real Tron 3. Different conversation. We're in the same boat. Yeah, we're in the same boat.
You know how I feel about that.
Yeah. And I think Brad Bird's one of those directors, and for anyone that doesn't know, I should have said this really, but we'll kick us in the behind the scenes. In the early 90s, before he signs on to do one of the greatest animated films ever made, one of my favorite films from our childhood, one of the best VHSs ever because it came with a figure, the Iron Giant, he was weighing up what it would be to have a career in the film industry versus having a family life. And that concept led to him formulating The Incredibles in 1993. And I had no idea of that. And I'm even sat there thinking, okay, what can I go off in 1993 film-wise, superhero-wise? What you've got 60s Batman, you've got a couple of Superman films, you've got 2 Tim Burton Batman films. It's not really a genre. And we're going to talk a lot maybe about the 60s today as well, but certainly with how this filming goes to be. And the behind the scenes on the Iron Giant, which I had no idea about, which is kind of upsetting, was Brad Bird essentially. Well, the film didn't. Well, it worked as a film, but contextually, I understand that it wasn't a box office hit. Warner Brothers didn't give them the budget other animated films had. Didn't have the animators behind it, which is kind of crazy to think, given I love it. And it's not just nostalgic childhood. I think it's one of them films. You get older, you go back to your childhood, and you find out that wow, this wasn't a great film to watch as a kid. This was actually a fantastic film. Yeah. No pun intended, not Fantastic Four, because we're sort of Fantastic Four.
Later.
Yeah. But what did you know any of that stuff? I'm just curious, because I've never ever looked into the behind the scenes of The Incredibles either. So I don't know what's public knowledge, what someone might know, might not know. It's never really something I've discussed with anyone.
I had absolutely no idea. So that was really fascinating just to hear you talk about that, to be honest. I mean, yeah, you can really see where the sort of the genesis of this story then comes from, if that was Brad Bird's like inner debate with himself, because that becomes the whole balancing act of the film, doesn't it? It's like the, for lack of a better term, the greater good or protecting your family, so that's really interesting. I had no idea.
All I have, and this is weird, I've got no knowledge of this. When I think of what is it to be working in film or to have a family, the image in my head is just Mr. Incredible sat slouched behind the desk on the 15 years later. And it's incredible because that's an image that's obviously people know, but I'd never thought that people do have that. And without delving into my personal life too much, I'm 29, not 15 years later, but I've had that, I'm not in the job that I was in X amount of years ago, but I'm better off in it to an extent, but I'm also not doing what I want to do. I'm not slouched to work every day. I'm lying in bed because I work from home. But it's one of those where I think a lot of people will see themselves in this just because the concept of superheroes is so outlandish that obviously they're not real, or are they? And everyone's probably had that, is this what I want to do, discussion with themselves at least once in their life. And I think it's quite brave to put it in a kid's film, in a family film, as the dad of a family, which really sets the tone. And some behind the scenes on how it came to be with Pixar that I really like is John Lasseter went to college with Brad Bird. They knew each other. I believe John Lasseter tried to sign him before he signed him in 2000 to The Incredibles. He was under contract to do The Iron Giant. Given what happened with The Iron Giant, it didn't work out the way he wanted behind the scenes. Obviously, when the film came out, he went straight to Pixar, and John Lasseter straight away was like, "Okay, you go make this film." And I love hearing these behind the scenes stories with Pixar. And I don't want to sound, in the old days, because we're not at the modern stuff anywhere near. These are all films I grew up with. These are all films we might have seen when we were younger. And I don't know if it's the same for you. It sounds a bit arrogant to say it. You'd probably have no understanding of behind the scenes at that age.
I think that's more than fair to say. I think most people, as a kid, maybe not so much now, but for people our age, the most understanding we had was, hey, I saw that film a year ago. It's finally out on VHS. I can watch it whenever I like now. Obviously, that's not quite the case now, but that was the only kind of level of understanding of these things take a lot of time that we don't see. Like, there's a lot of time and effort that goes into making these things that we're not privy to. But yeah, that sort of delayed release to home video was always something that I was like, oh my God, I remember that film from a year ago.
I used to go to Sainsbury's a lot, like where we'd go food shopping back in the days when supermarkets had them. I was like, oh my God, there's a Spider-Man 3 stand. It's out now. And parents were like, yeah, you can have it at Christmas. I was like, oh.
Yeah.
Because the summer block, I think I clocked at one age. I was like, the summer films come out just before Christmas. And I actually still love that sort of happens. But as an adult, it's like, no, I've already hit pre-order, or I'm just going to wait.
Yeah.
Because they're too expensive. But it's a really interesting approach. And I think with John Lasseter, I don't want to get into all Disney this, Disney that, because we don't know it entirely, so we can go off reports. I feel there's a real, not lack of creativity, but certainly the film industry is more, there seems to be less creatives like a John Lasseter. And it's really hard to say, because Pixar still has one of the originals running it, but with them being under the Disney banner, owned by Disney, there won't be the creative freedoms as of 20 plus years ago when they're this young, up-and-coming studio, got a great story, want to pitch it, want to make it, we'll run it for you. And I just think this is really interesting that he was like, yeah, come here. We like the story. Can you make the story? Can you make it happen? And Brad Bird had absolutely no experience with computer animation. He'd done 2D animation. He wanted to do 2D, and Pixar was kind of like, wow, it's a 3D animated company. So they kind of, I want to know if there's more behind the scenes. It feels like I've done a lack of research. The research into this has been interesting. Brad Bird kind of turned up and was like, okay, if I'm going to do it this way, I need these locations. I need these sets. I need these costumes. I need these animations. I need all of this, all the stuff you've never done in your first 5 films. And for this to work, we're going to have to do it. And apparently he even made the implication of, could this be live action? Which they also said no, because we're an animation company, which is interesting because he would go on to do live action projects. And I know he has a film out next year, which was lovely to read about. It's going to be on Netflix, which is always, if I'm allowed to say, a worry when it's like, great director's not made a film for quite a while. Live action, great. No one would fund it, great. Netflix, like, ooh. It goes 2 ways, right? We're going to really hope for The Irishman. Hope for that. That's all I can say. But
I would have loved to have been in the boardroom meeting when he was like, "Oh, we could do this live action." I would have loved to have seen what their reaction was. Yeah, ballsy. Fair play.
Imagine they're sat there like, but someone's already making the Fantastic Four next year. He's like, well, this isn't the Fantastic Four. This is the Incredibles. To the point that Fantastic Four apparently changed a lot of their story. I don't know how much that I believe, because I've got a very nostalgic soft spot for the first one. Without going on a different tangent, but it's not exactly the most fluent of films where there's a really obvious rewrite or reshoot somewhere. Whether they're just saying that to sort of soften the blow of the superior Fantastic Four film the year before, I'd never know, but it is really interesting. And just talking some of the animation that I think is really interesting. For example, in Monsters Inc., Boo has the pigtails. It's because they said Pixar, we're not quite there yet. We can't really animate hair. And apparently they tried to do the same with Violet in this, and Brad Bird was like, no. It's a central part of her character that she has hair that covers her eyes. It's this. Also, everyone knew someone that had hair like that at secondary school. Like, you've got to make it realistic. And I find it really interesting that he set all these standards. He developed these people. They let him bring in some of his team from the Iron Giant, which I thought was really cool. And at the same time, obviously, Pixar's probably working on, oh God, simultaneously, I'm assuming, without knowing, Finding Nemo and maybe even Cars, because this is obviously sandwiching those. And they're saying they signed him in 2000. So I wonder how much more behind the scenes there is on this that isn't available online. But it is very interesting, the production cycle. And kind of, I'll go with this chat and I'll sort of hand over to you. This is the first Pixar film where we have humans in leading roles. And the reason for this was obviously the story concept. Brad Bird basically saying, we're going to basically do this now. Is it probably one of the, without asking a question in a silly way, is it the strongest point of a director to basically rock up to an animation studio and say, this is exactly how I need my film to be? And I mean this in a really endearing way, that he pushed them to be better. He pushed them into developing the tech they were clearly working on behind the scenes. At some point, they were going to get there. But I love that it was an outside Pixar hire that went in, basically put their foot down. This is how we do it. And then he went and did it. And it worked very, very well. How do you feel with the animation side of this film?
I mean, it's really interesting because I don't watch this film and think it looks like it came out in 2004.
Yeah.
What I would be interested to know is what a 10-year-old watching it now would think. Because to me, I was still thinking you mentioned hair, for example, like Violet's hair and even Dash's hair it's kind of looking kind of similar to mine actually at the minute. There's texture to it. It moves. It's, it's fluid. It kind of waves. It does, when it's wet, you can see that it's soaked. It's got density. And I think it's like you say, it's a testament to Brad Bird for being ballsy enough to be like, no, this is what we're doing. I think that's a risky move that might have tanked his career if it had gone the wrong way. But the fact that he was confident enough in their ability to do it and to actually, execute what his vision was, and for just his confidence, really. I just think it's quite astounding. I genuinely cannot imagine walking in and being like, this is what we're doing. Aren't you just a new hire? Yeah, but we're doing this. We've all done that at a new job where you're like, I don't know enough, I'm gonna just follow the leader for a little bit. So fair play to him. But in terms of the actual, the talent that has gone into this film is so impressive. Like you say, Boo as a character in Monsters Inc. is, I'm not going to say relatively easy as a first step of a major human character, but a child that doesn't talk in full sentences is much easier to animate than it is full characters having entire conversations and fights and flying and throwing ice in the air and stretching. And do you know what I mean? So it's a huge leap. And it's, like I say, it was a risky move that did pay off.
It's amazing because even the jump from Nemo to this, which is a year apart in release dates, but I mean, you start at Toy Story, you've got Andy, Sid, and his mum, pretty much two same character models, one with a bit more hair than the other. Obviously, the mum you hardly see. Toy Story 2, you get Al, which is great. That's your first supporting character in a way. Contextually, he's bold. I'm going to get there. I'm not picking on bold people. Then you get to Monsters Inc., where you've got Boo, as you mentioned, great first sort of character moving around. She just spent half the film in the little monster suit. Great way to work. And this is what Pixar's so great. They're so great at working around the limitations because it never gets in the way of the story, but also by them working around it, you never see the flaws. And that's how I've noticed this in these early days, is that they didn't say, right, we can't animate humans, so let's put one in, make it look awful. Let's say, okay, now we're going to go do a film about bugs, which we can animate to look a little bit human-like, but they're bugs. And Toys is the same concept, Fish and Nemo, but in Nemo, you start to get a couple of humans. You get the dentist, you get his niece, bold again. So that's why I've been sat there thinking about the hair stuff a lot recently, because I'm like, they've really not, Sid's bold to an extent. It's shaved, but who knows? But I was like, they've really not, as you said, the textures are a big thing in this, and Pixar said, "Oh, can we work around this? It's interesting." They were like, "No, as you said, Dash, you've got the water mechanics, which is really tough to animate, of my understanding, especially contextually, like the early 2000s when they would have been doing this. This would have been all new technology." And I'm sat there contextually with recording to the start of December, so Avatar 3 is now out. I've just seen the behind the scenes on The Way of Water when they're there, like, this is how we develop motion capture underwater filming. Like, here's like skeletal designs. I'm just sat there like, this is 2025, and we're still like, we've just figured out how to shoot underwater in a nice
Yeah.
way. And it's fascinating that Pixar were like, yeah, okay, let's do the hair now. And it's a massive leap to go from, again, a couple of human characters in Nemo to this. It's just
I
you've
mean,
got
even
four
on the
these.
water that you mentioned, like it's not like it's just a puddle. It's not like it's even like a
Yeah,
bath. It's an entire ocean that a giant jet is falling into. Do you know what I mean? Like it's not just a small scale bit of water. It's like, well, it's an ocean.
it's
So
and they have them running on the water as well. Like the mechanics around it is really fascinating. And I think I'm gonna. This is why I'm happy to be talking about this. I'm not in a rude. I never pulled these 31 films for when it's done and looked at Incredibles. Nah, I'm dreading this. That's next week on Cars. This is one where I was like, okay, I want to get a newfound respect that I don't have, and maybe that'll make me appreciate it and enjoy it a bit more. And it has been the animation side, because the fun thing of the series so far has been discussing, well, here's the evolution of how they do humans. And when you get to Incredibles, it's almost like Pixar's, I know it's more Brad Bird, but they put the foot down after say, right, okay, we've done it. Now we can start doing some more of these projects that can involve humans. Now we can do this. And Paul, who was on Bugs Life, made a great point saying maybe one of the problems of Pixar, modern Pixar, is they figured out humans and they've kind of stuck with humans in a really, he said it in a much more eloquent way, much more in depth than I'll be able to say, but it kind of a good point that they were always stuck around the limitations, which forced them to do these crazy ideas, these more interesting stories. And we haven't had that as much, I'm going to say, in a nice way in the last 10, 15 years. Bit unfair, but when we get there in the series, I think it'll be fair. I kind of staring at one. I keep getting annoyed at Lightyear. I'm sorry, it's becoming a bit of a vendetta. There's not even that bad. I just think about Lightyear and I get annoyed. I shouldn't. It's really unfair. It's not that bad. It's just.
I enjoyed Lightyear. I thought it was fun. I didn't expect like, cinematic greatness. I just went in like, oh, it's Lightyear, and just had fun with it.
I was just a bit of a loser where I was like, Andy found this exciting in 1994. It must be the lamest kid ever. And yeah, the whole. Oh, I mean, you're a fan of Last Jedi, right? Do I dare? I'm a massive fan of Last Jedi, and the critics, and I think I said this on these picture reviews. I keep saying it. Lightyear is like my side tangent every week. When people use quotes subverting expectations as the most, I can't even say the word I want to say, like Neanderthal level of film analysis. That's where I want to go.
Yeah.
Subverting expectations. I think it's a nonsense criticism. But Lightyear is the only time where I've genuinely felt you've got the source material, which is known, which is the Emperor Zurg is his father. It's been around for decades. It's known. To then do the Lightyear film, to build up to the twist, to then say, I am you. I remember the cinema being fuming, because I was like, that's the only time I've genuinely, like, they know how important and what it should be. And that's the only time it's ever actually got under my skin. So whether I'm slagging myself off for myself and I do not know. But when I see it for like, oh, Last Jedi subverted expectations, like, did it, or did you just have theories that didn't work? And I love hearing people, and I don't mind hearing it when people are having actual discussions about what didn't work. But when it just becomes service level, I had this vision for 30 years of how a character should be. I was like, no, that's not valid. That's just
what you wanted. I think
yes.
there's a very big difference between want and need. Personally, I feel like Last Jedi is the film that it needed, not the one that we wanted. But that's not what we're talking about this week.
No, I was going to say, sorry to tangent. Again, I'm going to blame Lightyear for this. It's just going to keep getting everything from me. But we've spoke a little bit about superhero films already, the context of 2004. I don't have a little bit more to. I don't have much more to say than what we spoke about. If I'm allowed to say that, you spoke very well about Spider-Man 2. The similarities of this, the fact that it came out in the same year. Looking at it in 2025, and for me, who's a bit more cynical with not necessarily superhero films, a bit more cynical with studio output. That's probably a better term. Where I don't mind superhero films, I don't mind Marvel films, I don't mind DC. What I would like is well-made films where the CGI artists are given the time to make what they'd like to make, where the writers or directors are allowed to make the films they want to make themselves. And I know there is some hypocrisy of Pixar here because of what happened with Elio this year. We have a Brad Bird film here who, from start to finish, something worth noting, by the way, this is incredible. This is the only Pixar film, well, the first of 3 to have a singular writer credited. And I had to sort of triple, quadruple check that because you know what IMDb can be like with trivia.
Yeah.
And it's true. The only other ones is The Incredibles 2, which, as you can guess, is written by Brad Bird. Ratatouille, written by Brad Bird. He's the only one in all 30 films to have a sole writing credit is the key there. And I thought that was really interesting because you, in a complimentary way, you can never really notice it too much when other people jump on. But certainly in this, that test shows the testament to him as director for me, if I'm allowed to say so, that he had this vision. No one got in the way. Even Finding Nemo a film ago, which we loved, and Andrew Stanton had a very specific goal, they still brought other writers on board to help him with that, to develop it further. But Brad Bird from day one was, I'm dead set. And I think what makes this wilder is it's only the second film of his entire career. It's not in a disrespect, it's not Christopher Nolan. There's no one walking in saying, right, I am this name. I will tell you what to do, what not to do. This is someone where Pixar thought, run with it. And I think the studio should be praised for that. And I think it's something the entire film industry is missing in recent years.
I would agree. I mean, again, we're just talking about this on a very surface level way. We're not even considering the kind of things that would have to go into a pitch. He'll have had to do a lot of multitasking to get this above board. Even just aside from writing, which, it's, if anybody who's tried writing fiction when you're not at school will know it is incredibly hard to try and flesh out a story in such a way that it actually makes sense and that you're not just, vomiting out details for the sake of it and making it a coherent story. So the fact that he managed to do that and do it in a way that was suitable for a script, was suitable for a studio to be like, yeah, this is financially viable for us, and then to go and explain his vision for the animation style, etc., as we've just said. But we're not even including like the stuff involving production that we won't really be privy to about, the meetings they'll have to manage, the software they'll have to manage, the every single person they'll have to liaise with, and the offices, and even like the publicist side of things. So what this all tells me is that Brad Bird is an excellent multitasker.
Yeah.
Fair play to him.
I kind of the career he's had too. I'm just going to say it really nicely that the fact he broke out of, it sounds like he's a journalist, but not many people go from animation to live action. And he's been able to sort of go back and forth at his own will. And not only that, he goes and makes a film with Tom Cruise, a great action film. And if I'm honest, save Mission Impossible. Different conversation, but that is one of the key films in the Tom Cruise renaissance, which is, they would have seen the incredible. Like, I'm picturing Tom Cruise at a cinema looking at a camera saying, I love popcorn, watching The Incredibles. But he's had a career outside of that too. And I really think there's a reason they pushed him, to go from Ratatouille into that on top is quite wild. So respectfully within the industry, even when he was at college with John Lasseter, they'd have known. And I'm trying to really memorize. Did you watch the Great ILM series a couple of years back?
I did. Yeah, it was amazing.
I'm convinced, and I could be wrong, that Brad Bird is in that at some point, and I just can't. I think I might be wrong, but I've seen something where they bring up Brad Bird and he's involved with something. Maybe it's not that. Maybe it's the Pixar story or something else. But I was trying to scan ahead. What have I seen this behind the scenes with him in? So I don't know if he's got a connection to Lucasfilm. I could be wrong. He's not been employed by them. Obviously, Lasseter.
He might have just been a talking head in
this. Because Lasseter was obviously a part of it before it got sold to Steve Jobs.
Yeah.
So I sat there, I couldn't find anything. I didn't want to say it with the concrete arrogance of
Yeah.
he was a George Lucas protege, as you will. But it is very much that maybe he was known to others within the industry at that point, which I do find fascinating. But let's talk about a couple of the characters of the story that comes with it. So we're gonna. I mean, I don't want to talk about the plot in a literal let's go A to Z because we all know the story. If you're watching this review, we'll talk about obviously some of the big moments, but we'll kind of be able to do that through the characters. So we'll kickstart with Mr. Incredible, played by Craig T. Nelson, an actor I'm going to say I'm very unfamiliar with still to this day, 20 plus years later. That's very strange to say. And The Incredibles is a fascinating one because a lot of them are very recognizable. And even one character we'll get to, I remember being an age, I was like, oh my God, this person is that? And you get that a lot with some animated stuff, but as a kid, I never liked Mr. Incredible, and I'm going to say it.
Oh,
but was this
okay.
the fact I was a kid? Was I a kid that didn't like Superman as a character because I didn't like the fact he was essentially perfect? So I'm wondering if it was a bit of just stupid child George being like, well, he's a bit too perfect for my liking. Because I liked him much more as an adult.
Yeah, I have to say, I think he's more interesting as an adult because of what we said earlier about him being relatable and trying to, multitask and, raise a family while still trying to enjoy himself as a superhero, etc., etc. But as a kid, I guess you're mainly seeing it through the eyes of, like you said, the sort of Boy Scout Superman-esque is just strong and tough, can do loads of things. Whereas the more interesting characters are the ones that are a little bit more complex and are a bit more sort of, well, it's the kids. They're trying to manage school life. So when you're a kid, you will automatically gravitate to that because that's what you're going through. That's what you're dealing with. So they automatically become more relatable. Whereas obviously now we're a bit older, we're like, oh, I understand the desk slouch. But I really love the sort of first like half an hour from Bob's perspective is so fascinating. It's so relatable. Like I just think it's the whole, even when he's lying to his wife and you can see that sort of glow come back, it's just so interesting seeing that through like the superhero lens because he's technically wearing like 3 masks. He's wearing the dad mask, he's wearing the faithful husband mask, and he's like, yes, wearing a literal mask. I just think it's really interesting they've got these like, he's more of a multifaceted character than just the Boy Scout that we thought he was as a kid. And like, Craig T. Nelson was a great choice for that. I think he kind of gives it a gravitas, but not so much that it's like a commanding Superman or like, do you know what I mean? He doesn't try and reel off these huge speeches about truth and justice.
I think that's the key as well, that I don't want to say this film is self-aware because it's really not. And I do think if this was made today, it would be more self-aware of, oh, there's too many superheroes. And one thing I found hilarious, especially going back to the start, is it's kind of the Sokovia Accords from Civil War. Like, I love the concept of, I didn't want to be saved. That's one of the funniest, like, it's not really a gag, but just as like a character thing, like, I know it's a bit dark. It's like, I didn't want to be saved. It has to be saved. Now I've got a bad back. What's the line? You ruined my death. Is that what he says? Like,
yeah, it is. Yeah.
That's so dark. And as a kid, it's like, as an adult, like, oh, that's dark. That's kind of funny in like a dark humor way. And you can't really, I don't want to sound like that type. It's like, they probably wouldn't say that on a Pixar film today. And
No.
I think the one thing, and maybe this is animation, not Pixar, you go to a lot of those childhood films of yours as adults, and there's a lot of adult jokes. And I've got a very weird thing. I'm going to go off a tangent, but it's Pixar. I bought this for Toy Story's 30th anniversary. I've never bought Toy Story merchandise. They released Sid's toys as a box of merch. I've got no idea where I'm ever going to keep this, right? But they included everything except Hooker. And I only realized in like my mid-20s that the hooker in the room, it's the legs and a hooker. And I was like, oh, that's funny. That's a great gag. But they can't release it as merchandise. I was like, I understand that. I just feel like because the studios own these now, everything is to a T, ran through groups, ran through decisions. You miss that something you might catch. And no child's going to watch Toy Story and think about her because they didn't know what it means. It's a little visual gag. And I miss that. And I think The Incredibles does a great job at those gags as well. With Edna Mode, the no capes, all that sort of
Mm.
stuff. It's very not self-aware. It's just, I feel it's ahead of its time, as you mentioned earlier. It knows what the no capes thing's actually hilarious. Like I don't
Oh yeah.
understand the. I think did Brad Bird say he kind of got it from Watchmen? I think I've read the original novel many years ago. I can't remember anything now, but I think there's a character that dies and it's to do with a cape, and he was like, well, that was the foundation. So I basically thought I can have a bit of fun with this, and
Yeah.
obviously you get to the ending and it sells itself as this great story device, and I like that, and it without getting on the AI chart as well, it feels like only something a human could do.
Mm.
It's such a
It's
small
clever.
thing.
It's clever.
Yeah, and it's so associated to the genre as well.
Yeah, you're
Um,
exactly right about Watchmen. That is what happens in that book, and that is without sounding like your stereotypical comic book nerd, that is a fantastic book. Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons just it was a perfect critique of the genre whilst reinventing it, and there's a reason why everybody's inspired by it because it is brilliant. But we're now at a point where it's almost like commonplace because it does deconstruct these
yeah,
things, and so it is. Yeah, that the capes joke is that, but what I find astounding is that they managed to get that past Disney because that is just a montage of people dying.
yeah.
Like that is, that is a montage of people dying in horrific ways repeatedly. Is it gale force or something gets sucked into a into a turbine
What a name!
engine midair? Like that's gnarly. That's cool.
Oh,
um, and
there's
like
so
you
many
say,
great.
it's such a mature kind of storyline, but without being a mature story. I just yeah, I think I appreciated it much more on the rewatch than I did as a child, even though I really enjoyed it as a child. I don't want to say loved as a child because there are other films that came above
Yeah,
it. But yeah, like I think I just appreciated it way more now, especially being a fan of the genre, the superhero genre. Um, I just the capes gag is I would potentially say is my favorite sequence in the film. I just think it's phenomenally done. Even the tornado, the guy that gets sucked into the tornado because he's like right up into the frame and then just gone. Fantastic.
there's a lot of great take. I mean, the little it feels like a lived-in world. And I've already spoke about this. This
Yes.
isn't on the schedule. I won't detract too much, but the superheroes exist. There's no over elaborate. Oh, the birth of superheroes. It's the opposite. It's we just accept them as part of our society, and with that, you get great villains. And I just want to say the name. Bon Voyage is the greatest villain name maybe ever, and the fact he's just French.
Yeah.
Like there's nothing to it. There's a
Incroyable.
there's like a little bit of a French twang on the soundtrack, and he's got
Yeah.
the mind face. I was like, perfect. Like he's not a rip off of the Joker. They're not ripping it. It's just like they just wanted to. And I can't remember the name. They had another name for him, and it was going to be about a champagne brand. And the champagne company was like, "Listen, you just can't do this. We will have to go to court." I was like, "But we got Bon Voyage out of it, so it all worked out." He's probably still alive. His fate
Yeah.
is undetermined.
Very true.
But we'll also talk about Elastigirl, voiced by Holly Hunter, someone I'm much more familiar with, I'm allowed to say.
Mm-hmm.
And this is an interesting one because I do like Elastigirl. The dual role of the mother looking out for her children, through that, she has to give up the superhero life. Probably made the most sacrifices, I guess you could say, in a polite way. The very stereotypical nuclear family of America, which works with the world that they're in. I love her in this.
Mm.
Again, a character I didn't like as much when I was younger. I think you've hit the nail on the head earlier. We were the kids. We lived through the kids' eyes and ears. And she's the responsible adult. I know the second one is more about her because the first one's about Miss Incredible. I just, for the life of me, cannot remember anything about the second film. That's really bad, and that's on me.
Yeah, she basically becomes the face of the movement to sort of get superheroes legal again, kind of for lack of a better term, and to sort of condense it down a bit. Yeah, she becomes the face of that, so she's much more like at the front of the action and the actual plot rather than being left at home with the kids. But that in itself, again, like as we just said, I found really interesting. You know, she is like, you know, Mr. Fantastic. She has those stretching
Yeah.
powers, and yet she's reduced to just holding her family together quite literally at the dinner table. You know what I mean? So it's, you know, it's so interesting seeing this sort of normalization of powers, but just in such a sort of like in a nothing situation of just the kids are arguing, I need to grab him, so I'm just going to grab him. Like it's even stuff like that. Like you say, it makes it feel lived in. You know, she's grabbed those kids from ripping each other apart, God knows how many times, because she's got powers. I just think it's such a well plotted story and plotted characters. You know, she particularly, like Holly Hunter's performance in it is fantastic, well, or incredible, for lack of a better term.
They've chosen the right powers, I think, on the right people in the family, because it could have been all too easy to do. Well, you know, Fantastic Four's got Mr. Fantastic. Let's put that on Dash. But I like that each of them, and with the two kids, Violet and Dash, this is maybe where I will lean towards what we said even further. That, you know, I like Dash when I was younger. He was the cool one. He was the quick one. I had two older sisters. One of them at that point of our lives did have the emo fringe, as we call it, growing up. And I would see a lot of her in that, and we'd even say it to her. I love that, and we were at school like them. We always want to annoy the teacher we didn't like. He got to do it, we couldn't. He was the cool one, and that's the one I always liked. He could literally run on water. That's quality, and the fact they animate that that's such an incredible sequence, that chase as well. For again, almost the infancy of this studio, 6 films in, still within 10 years of Toy Story, to go from some of those Toy Story sequences which still look remarkable. Think about Buzz going through the assault course, and then you've got literal superhero running on water away from flying devices trying to get him. That could be live action, and that would look not the same, but a weird complementary way without sounding detractive animation. The jokes about being live action, this absolutely, if this was live action, would have been regarded as one of the best films in X amount of years.
Yeah.
Would have cost a bomb, would have cost even more. But I could imagine how remarkable it would be. But I love the Dash and Violet relationship. And at the end of the day, they get it right because they're two siblings that argue, but they still love each other. And they encapsulate the family dynamic. And it's the teenage, the girl that wants to impress the guy, and she's the shy and quiet one. As in, like, he's the sort of the lad type running, taking the mick. They get the kids wrong. I think the film doesn't work. They get the kids right, adults wrong. The film also won't work. They had to get the 4 perfect, and they did. Every bit of involvement on the way, nailed it.
Yeah, I mean, that moment you mentioned when they all end up teaming up together is such a, like, you know, we're so used to having that team up hero moment now, that I think we take for granted. That scene in particular, like you say, running on water is not something that's easy to animate, but let alone having a flying, spinning Beyblade basically chasing him. It's just, yeah, I don't know if we can praise the animators enough. You know, we always see that tweet that pops up periodically where it's like, oh, what happened to CGI? This was Transformers back in 2007. And then they'll, you know, use, I don't
Davy Jones.
It's because of time. That's the problem. Production crunch is such a huge issue now in Hollywood because the demand is so just constant. But if you give people more time, they'll deliver better work. And I think this is exactly a testament to that. Like, it's just gorgeous.
It's held up so well. And even thinking of like the jungle landscapes, it's the layers, it's they weren't, not in a disrespect, they weren't restricting it to a town, to a city, and so this is a what's the old term, globe-trotting adventure that they'd say, and those sorts of things. And going for that 50s 60s aesthetic works so well. And before we get to the villain, we have to talk very briefly, I guess, about Frozone, Samuel L. Jackson, the origin of them wanting Sam Jackson was, we just needed someone who was cool. And it doesn't matter if it's 1994, 2004, 2024, Sam Jackson is always going to have that. I love Frozone. Everyone knows the super suit quotes, the throwing ice. He is genuinely just one of the coolest people in all of us. And again, it's that world building that they're friends. They have a
Mm,
social life. They do it on the side still. They're able to play with all of those mechanics because that makes it feel really. It's not, oh, I've not seen my friend for 30 years. It's no, they've been doing this for probably 5-10 years on the side still. And I just
yeah.
love that. And I don't think you could get anyone but Sam Jackson to do that, if I'm honest.
No, I mean Sam Jackson is just the epitome of cool. If you were a superhero and you had a best friend, you'd want it to be Samuel L. Jackson because why would you not? They have that. He has that line where he's just like, "Oh, I just wish we'd just go bowling for once." And I was like, again, that paints such a picture of their dynamic and how they do just want to hang out, but there is always that call to action. There is always that, oh, we should do the right thing. It's so like ingrained in them. It just makes them so like well-rounded characters that even though they enjoy being superheroes and they do want to do the right thing, they would just like to go for a beer sometimes.
And it makes it's real though, isn't it? Like that's how it would be.
Yeah.
And you've had
Yeah.
that with your colleagues, the ones you want to go out with. You don't work together anymore. You still might meet once in a blue moon. It adds to it. And I know I'm keeping an eye on the clock as well. We've got to talk about Syndrome. I'm going to make a really bold claim. So
Go
I
on.
spoke very highly about Hopper on Bug's Life, which is very controversial given the voice actor.
Hmm.
Maybe adds to it if I can say that in a non-horrible way. Syndrome, I think, is actually not only one of. I don't want to call him an underrated villain, right? Because underrated is a term that's overused now. There's an irony there. I think he's a low key, like not like great as in oh he's a good one, like an actual great amongst villains in cinema. And the reason why, and this is maybe getting a bit too into the real world, I feel in recent years the concept of Syndrome is far more real.
Oh,
The
oh,
the
100% more
the
real.
and I don't even like the disappointed, the bitter fanboy, the oh not everyone's don't believe that your celebrities you like that in person. It's taking all of that away because he is in the wrong from day one as a child to try and work with a superhero who almost gets killed by a terrorist to end up having the grudge of grudges. And I'm someone I love to hold a grudge. I don't mind saying that. Like I absolutely own it.
I'm quite the
As
same,
and
to be
when,
honest.
as long as you don't cross any weird boundaries, it's absolutely fine. And a lot of the time it makes for a good joke. But the concept of Syndrome as a villain that he was so pissed off as a boy because he was rejected, going into like incel social media here, that
Yeah.
he would then want to wipe out superheroes. And even the concept of Project Kronos, Kronos being the Greek god that ate all of his children, and then Zeus had to defeat him to rule supreme. And you sat there like that's pretty ballsy for Pixar to put in a film, but the logic of it feels so real that I'm not saying it happens because it doesn't, but I love that idea of the villain being the rejected superhero, not with powers, not part of the group turned on them, just like a literal child who spent 15 years. Don't know how he gets that money. Don't know what tech he's built. He's got the genius base, the villain base, the plan, the great concept of it, the execution of it. And as every villain absolutely should go, a memorable death amongst the way. He isn't afraid to try and kill the children. And apparently this was a big thing making it. That apparently not like laws were relaxed, but traditionally in American films, family films, violence is never put against children. This is a villain that's just he's fine with it. Now, I mean, I'm not saying it's a generational thing. I didn't know that until this week that was apparently a thing.
Mm.
To me, I'm used to growing up with Green Goblin like beating the shit into Spider-Man, like fist to fist combat, stabbing himself, Thanos just slapping half the world. Maybe it is more of that. Oh, people wouldn't have risked this in the 80s, 90s, but the noughties, tens, not so bad. I
Yeah, I
think
think that
Syndrome's
was
great.
that was the shifting point though, wasn't it? Because that was only like, well, yeah, you obviously had Spider-Man a couple of years before. You had Spider-Man 2, which again is
Yeah,
seriously quite dark in places. Doc Ock in surgery is basically Evil Dead
yeah,
2. And then we got, Batman Begins a year later, which then pushes
yeah,
that even further. And then obviously we get Dark Knight. So it is still part of that shift, even though it is such a light film and it's such a fun film. Like you can put this on at any time and it just be great fun. But once you look closely at it, it is really dark. Even at the start, one thing I'd never really noticed before, there's just a police car chase. and the robbers have guns and they're shooting at the police. Now, this is a kids' film and they're animating people shooting at each other. Like you said, there's violence threats against children. They're blowing the plane out of the sky, thinking that
Yeah.
they've just killed the kids. Mr. Incredible thinks his whole family has literally just been blown up. Like, it is such a dark film, but it kind of works. Like, it balances those two tones really well. Yeah, I just think it's such an interesting point for the genre in 2004. I mean, that it managed to do both of those things, like acknowledging the light-hearted tone and the sort of the spandex and the daft superheroics, whilst also being part of that sort of generational shift that we have all talked about, at length because of Christopher Nolan. I just think it's fascinating that they managed to do both and show that the superhero genre can be both. And although we know that now, obviously there was a huge chunk of time where every single movie had to be the gritty reimagining. And Incredibles just sort of took that on the chin and did it in its own way. So yeah, and I think Syndrome leans into that. He's a tech bro. That's what he is at heart, and he's a tech bro trying to just manipulate the situation for himself, and pays the price with a phenomenal death.
I love so when he drops the remote and he actually is just terrified. Like,
Yeah.
he knows his device, and it's so real. I'm not saying it's going to happen soon, but you never know with AI. Terminator 2, insert that here. But it feels so authentic. And again, we all know a Syndrome. Every
Yeah.
one of us. We all know someone, whether it's school, work, outside of those things. We've all met one. We all know what they're like. One thing I'll talk about before we get into the legacy and start to round out, I've got to talk about the score. Michael Giacchino's first Pixar film. Now, I'm on a TBC asterisk with this. When I saw him live, there's a great short one-man band, which I think is attached to Cars. He composed that, and he said on this concert, it's 2017 or 19, he said, this was my first Pixar thing. But The Incredibles obviously came out first. Whether the short was done in advance, I do not know. But this is theoretically his first film. I love the soundtrack. I love Michael Giacchino. He's in my top. I've got a top 4 composers. It was a top 3, but now it's a solid 4 because Ludwig Göransson sits there with them. He is incredible, and the approach to the score for this, Brad Bird wanted the 60s era setting. What I did not know until today, which is completely blowing my mind, John Barry was originally hired to do the soundtrack.
Wow.
The first teaser trailer is a John Barry scored re-recording of On Her Majesty's Secret Service. And apparently him and Brad Bird disagreed on what they wanted the score to be for the characters. And I find that fascinating that you've got John Barry. At this point in time, it's obviously still alive. I think he passed away in 2011 or 13. I could be wrong. Obviously, you think of the 60s cinema, what do you think of James Bond? Get the Bond composer.
Yeah.
Genius to do. But I really respect that it didn't work. And that's so strange to say because the composer had a vision in mind. The director had a vision in mind. They did not agree. They went their separate ways. Clearly, amicably. No big dramas, no nasty behind-the-scenes politics. Just they went their separate ways. And then you bring in Michael Giacchino, who would go on to do X amount of Pixar scores. One of the greats. I haven't seen Lost. Had it just started at this point? Was it 03? I know a lot about Lost. Is it 2003 it started? So he'd have just moved from video games into TV, and this would have been him moving into films with it. And so begins, I think. I think he is one of the true great composers that the average person in the street can't name. I think at this point in time, I think everyone knows who John Williams is. I think everyone knows, like your non-film fans know who Hans Zimmer is. I think those two they know. And I think, like I always said, Michael Giacchino is like the next John Williams because that is the music, that is the approach, the orchestra.
Yeah.
He's so great, and I love the score to this, and I'm so glad it worked out. He's worked with Brad Bird many times since with Pixar. What did you think of the score, very briefly?
I love it. It's so 60s spy, which is bizarre that John Barry didn't kind of follow through with that. You would have assumed that would have been the perfect choice. But again, it comes back to, I guess, Brad Bird knowing exactly what he wants. Yeah, Giacchino really gets the 60s spy side of the score really like just spot on. It paints the picture of the world they're living in just so
Yeah.
perfectly, that you could kind of, if you were just listening to the score, you could kind of envisage that kind of world without needing to see the 60s visuals. Like you have the police with like the double-breasted coats and the old school cars, etc., etc. But yeah, Giacchino, I have to agree, definitely one of the greats. For me, I'd put him up there, sort of. Yeah, John Williams, Zimmer. For me, like Trent Reznor, Atticus Ross are starting to up there.
Yeah.
Phenomenal. Yeah, I'd say top five. Top five.
Yeah. Very, very fair. I love. We get to talk about more in this series. That's the great thing. And then we're going to get to Up, and everyone cries.
Oh,
I'm going to add this though. This is the first. I mean, we're going to talk about legacy. We're going to talk about some Oscars, but I will say the score. This was the first Pixar film not to get nominated for Best Original Score.
Okay.
Now, I'm not one of them that berates the Oscars, especially when it's a nomination. Sometimes it's very fair when there are very, very obvious snubs. But
Yeah.
I can't tell you what I think 2004 would have been Harry Potter and the Prison of Azkaban because John Williams. That tends to be because the best Harry Potter score, though. I will say that after the Philosopher's Stone. But this was nominated for 4 Oscars for Best Original Screenplay, Sound Editing, Sound Mixing, and Animation. It would win Animated Film, and it would also win Sound Editing, which was the first non-musical Pixar Oscar, which sounds very weird to say out loud, and I've just said that out loud.
Yeah.
Which is kind of great, to be fair, that an animated film gets a sound Oscar, given the stereotype of Oscar voters. It's animated, it's for children. Clearly, this one, it showed that they didn't just do it in that way, which is great for the industry, great for these. And
but again, it's because it's so varied. We said earlier on, it takes place in so many different locations that are, you have the volcano lair that's literally dripping with lava, for example. You have all the water, you have the cityscapes.
The
There's so much to it.
There's so much going on. And then I think I do prefer the sound Oscar being 1, not 2. Not to disrespect those mixers, but the mixture of the soundtrack always comes in, and especially knowing it's animation that whilst on set you can dub over, and obviously in the studio you can do that too. They have the same approach to fix anything that needs to be fixed. But it's a very delicate line, and it's great to see recognition for something outside what you'd assume. But its box office is the 4th highest grossing film in 2004. It grossed 630 million off a budget between 90 to 140. But I'm just going to list the 3 films that outgrossed it. I don't normally just sit there talking box office, but I'm very fond of the noughties. So Spider-Man 2 was 3rd, with 780. Prison of Azkaban 2nd, 798. Shrek 2, 935 million.
Wow.
No idea that Shrek 2 was as big as it was at the time. I remember seeing it in the cinema. I remember it was huge, but all my memories are attached to Shrek 1, not Shrek 2. But it was gigantic, apparently. It's kind of understandable.
Insane. Yeah, it makes sense. DreamWorks are a powerhouse in themselves. But if you'd have asked me to stack up this with that, I would have said Incredibles every time. Wow.
And it's the thing with Shrek. Oh God, no, I actually forgot what I was going to say. Let's move on, because I actually thought I had some really good say, but I didn't. I don't even have any recollection of what that was going to be either. I was going to ask a question, but that's escaped my mind. Question I do want to ask before we get to favourite scenes and final thoughts, something that's been spoke about with certainty for 20 years until this year. Is The Incredibles the best Fantastic Four film?
Yes, but only by a margin, because I know First Steps that obviously came out this year did get a bit of grief for being just a bit generic in places. Personally, I don't think Pedro Pascal was the right person to play Reed for the MCU. He's good, he's fine. It's Pedro Pascal, you're going to get a good performance out of him, but for the MCU, I wanted somebody with a bit more believability, and I can't help but just see Pedro Pascal. That's its own issue. You could save that for another episode. But I think Incredibles gets the family dynamic better especially from the comics, and especially from the comics that the Fantastic Four started at and sort of set the definitive tone from the 60s. In more recent years, it's become very like alternate universes and sort of cosmic rewrites, whereas back in the day, it was just they are space adventurers. They're just going to weird planets and just exploring different civilizations and stuff. But the core family dynamic, this film, it's the same. It's you put these two pictures, they're the same thing. Whereas I think First Steps, although it was really nice to see the dynamic in the MCU, and I think all four actors were great together, I didn't get that sense of we are a real family. Whereas this core group, they're so messy at times, but they love each other and they're here for each other. They hate each other at times. Whereas again, it was just very sterilized in the MCU because it kind of had to be, I guess. They're introducing a new concept in a new universe as well. So they had to kind of play it a bit more safer. So there wasn't any room for anybody to be a bit messy and a bit annoying, or do you know what I mean? So I do think Incredibles is the best Fantastic Four movie, but I would say it's only by a slim margin because First Steps did try and go outside the box. It introduced things like Galactus and Silver Surfer, obviously, in a comic accurate fashion, and you did get that sort of technological feel to the family and the anachronistic kind of weird universe. It was cool, but just in terms of character writing, this is the Fantastic Four, like of the 60s. It's great.
It's amazing that at least this year we get to have the discussion, whereas before it was just a slam dunk. Like, that the comments, this is the real Fantastic Four, but you are kind of right, and I do agree on it is the family dynamic that makes this film work. And with Fantastic Four, my only real criticism is First Steps feels like it should have been the sequel.
Yeah.
Not that I need an origin, but I wanted that family set up before we then get the baby Galactus. Big stuff. I'm same as you. Love First Steps. Really enjoyed it. Couple of issues. I'm hoping Doomsday not necessarily improves the issues, but I hope it isn't just we wanted you because we wanted to do Doomsday. That's my only fear. And we'll find out in what will be a year. By the time this video goes up, apparently there would have been a trailer. I say apparently because we don't want to believe everything in case anything happens. Like, they need to do more reshoots or they've run out of time.
Literally anything could happen. What I do like though is that Giacchino scored both. That's quite nice.
Yes. And he did did you see recently? Sorry, it's gone a tangent. He had to redo his Fantastic Four score. They changed a couple of things, and I was like, whoa. Considering the score is but it is one of the best scores of the year for me personally, and the most how do I say it? Oh wow, it's not Tronaries, but it's got its own identity without sounding like every other generic superhero soundtrack that came before it. And it's also great that, as you said, Giacchino's done both The Incredibles and Fantastic Four, and they could have been the same, but they're really not, which is also helpful. Maybe if he hadn't done The Incredibles, this score would have been his Fantastic Four.
Maybe.
Different worlds, different universes. But if we head into a favorite scene, oh my God, there's a lot to love in this film. But just one moment that stands out, and I know it's very boring. I love a good origin. I love a good setup. I like universe building. I love the whole sort of opening act before the time jump. I know that's not a scene as such, but this is the world of their heroes. And without berating Pixar, I'm very surprised with the Disney Plus bombardment of let's do animated series A, B, and C. I'm so surprised that they didn't ever want to do not like an incredible spin-off, but let's see some of those other heroes. Not that we need it, because we don't need it, but it feels like a rich universe, and I'd have loved to have seen a bit more. But I quite like that. That's what I vibe with, and I love the drama that comes later. But I just love that opening. Shaking the cat of the tree, just slamming it straight into the robbers. It sets up the core characters perfectly. I know it's a bit of a cop out picking an opening, but if the opening doesn't work, the rest of the film can't work.
Absolutely, and I think for me, it comes down to the montages. And I know typically a montage is such a lazy format. It's just a way of moving things on while telling story really quickly. but here it does them really well. Like again, cop out to mention the opening, the interviews, the talking head interviews are
Yeah.
fantastic. Again, paints a bit of the world, gives you an insight into their characters, and then just lets them be. It's so part of me is like, oh, I would have maybe liked to have seen them scattered throughout more. Um, Kind of almost like Mr. and Mrs. Smith with Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt, where you have them every so often just talking about the relationship. But yeah, I love the montage in this, and I love the training one that he has as well, because it's just got these really nice moments of comedy that, like, if you were a superhero, of course you'd do stupid shit like trying to juggle a train with your feet. It just has fun with it. It lets the superheroes have fun without just, be that brooding, oh God, woe is me, the weight of the world is on my shoulders. It's just, again, it just comes down to fun. And I think that's what this film does so well. It's just a really easy watch. You can get more out of it if you want more out of it. Like, as we were saying earlier, the mature themes and the darker stuff. But if you just want like a fun sort of rollicking adventure, it's there. It's just great. And I think the montages get that spot on
Yeah.
without needing to go like really ham-fisted.
No, excellent. I agree with that. Should we do final thoughts? Anything you want to think about very quickly before? I will just say, you mentioned Mr. and Mrs. Smith. Last thing I'll say, last detox. The original names were going to be Smith on the Family. I couldn't find it for sure if Mr. and Mrs. Smith had anything to do with them becoming seems a bit too. No, they can't change all of that, but it kind of would have been a Mr. and Mrs. Smith vibe. But
yeah, that would kind of work. But then I guess the Smiths as a title might not have. Mind you, I guess it's not called the Pars; it is still the Incredibles. But
Smith's too easy as a name, isn't it? Like what's
yeah,
generic surname Smith? Okay, fair enough. But
yeah, that might have been a bit lazy, actually. Maybe we would have been ripping into it for being lazy. In terms of final thoughts, like the one thing that I feel we've is an egregious mistake that we've not mentioned, Edna Mode. What a character. Again, such a, isn't in it very much, and yet anybody who's watched it knows exactly who she is. And it has created such a distinct personality with kind of a few lines, really. I have to say, I would arguably. No, I'll say it with my whole chest. Edna Mode's my favorite character of the film.
That's very fair. Voiced by Brad Bird again.
Exactly.
He sent the stories. He sent a demo tape to the actress he wanted to play Edna Mode, and she basically responded saying, "You're her. It's done. Like, what do you need me for? Listen to that again." And I love when that happens with some of these films. Andrew Stanton in Nemo is Thrash or Thrush, the turtle. Not intentional cameo, but it happens. They fall into these nice places, and I think segue into my final thoughts. This kind of cements this as Brad Bird's film. That whilst it's called The Incredibles, I know Pixar's arrogant. You could have put it as Brad Bird's The Incredibles because it feels like this ends with him. It's his franchise because there has been a sequel. There's going to be a third film. And I kind of respect it that people joke for years, oh, we know what happened at the ending, the great cliffhanger. I like the fact they were never desperate to milk this as recognizable as the brand is, as big as this is and still is today. It's huge. It's almost like Pixar has that respectable, it's Brad Bird's. This is what he wants to do with it. And I kind of, as I said, I went into this not the biggest fan of The Incredibles. I've never spoken about The Incredibles for probably over an hour before with someone, which has been fantastic. And I've come out of this really respecting it as not just an animated film, but as a film itself, what it's trying to do, the stories, the themes it's putting in a kid's film in the mid-noughties. I think this is a pretty great film. And I think this might change my views on it. And for where it sits within Pixar, it's rightfully spoken about by so many and loved by so many more too.
Yeah, I mean, one of the best sort of ways to gauge a film's sort of lasting popularity, and I know it sounds really derivative, is Halloween costumes. You will always see people dressed up as the Incredibles, like every year consistently. Maybe it's just really good branding. Maybe it's just because it's a great film, but it has a staying power. And hopefully, the third film will sort of stick the landing as a really great trilogy. Because the second one is fun. I don't think it has the same sort of impact as the first one. The first one is just truly like one
Yeah.
of the greats, but yeah, the second one's just fun. But if they could nail a third film and it'd be great, I think it would make a really solid trilogy. But they would have to think of some way of deconstructing superheroes even further than they already have.
We've got 2028, I believe. I'm assuming
Mm,
when Brad Bird's next film comes out, the whole press tour will be so The Incredibles 3, eh? But it's official, it's happening, and we won't be covering that on this series, but we will look ahead to the future. And we can see next week we'll be kickstarting 2026 on the Pixar Retrospective with everyone's favourite cars. I say that sarcastically. There is a generation that treat cars like we treat Toy Story, which is terrifying. We then have Ratatouille, Wally, Up, and many more to come. An absolute, I keep calling it, it's one of the greatest runs of a studio. Those first 11 Pixar films are remarkable. And it's still a great studio, 30 plus films in. But just what they're able to do at the beginning, I think, is almost unparalleled in animation, which is a discussion worth having. But Eammon, it's been incredible to have you on. I'm sorry we've gone over. We said an hour.
it's roughly an hour.
Yeah, we're fine. We've not gone too far over. We're not past the runtime, 1 hour 55. That would be a long discussion, but it's been a genuine pleasure to have you back on, especially knowing you are moving house and you're very, very busy. Where can the people find you for what you've been working on, for your writing, reviews, and everything else?
Well, first off, thank you so much for having me back on again. Like it was a delight to talk about Andor. It was a delight to talk about Incredibles. I'm more than happy to come back again. If you want to find me online somewhere, I write and edit at dexito.com for the TV and movies section of the site. I also interview various actors and directors and writers and such for the site. So you'll be able to find our interviews on at Dexito or at Screen Time because we have a couple of accounts. You can find me at Eammon Jacobs.
Everybody, please do. As this has been a pleasure, I'm so happy you came back on. I'm able to make this work. So everybody watching at home, it's been a delight talking Incredible. Something I was a little bit nervous about. And as we said at the start, this is the probable last video of the year. We're recording this on the 1st of December for context, so that's why I don't know. I hope you've all had a lovely Christmas talking from the future. I hope you're all excited for Stranger Things tomorrow night, I guess I've got to say as well. Presuming Volume 2 is good. I'll be watching that in between. And we will have a Stranger Things spoiler discussion up on New Year's Day. And there probably will be a top 10 of 2025 list as always on New Year's Eve. So I'll have a few more films to watch by the time this video comes out. And I hope you have all too had a wonderful year. Thank you everybody so much for your support of the channel, for following us, sticking with us, new people, old people, maybe watch this in the future. You found the series. I hope the rest of the series is as good as this one. If it is, it's been a very strong start so far. So once again, thank you all so much. Take care. See you on the next one.